Good evening, everyone. I am Lacette Cross, Reverend L, co-founder and director of UGRC Black Pride RVA. I'm excited. This is our third Thursday virtual event, thanks to Miss Rona. Natasha Crosby is our board chair, no, excuse me, is our board treasurer. And she and I will be moderating the panel this evening. We're grateful for the participants who are on the webinar with us, and we invite the folks who are watching us via Facebook live stream to share this out right now. Hold your watch parties. We invite our panelists to do the same so that folks can engage the conversation with us. As folks are doing that, I'm going to do just a brief introduction of who we are, what we're doing, and then Natasha is going to lead us in beginning to kick off the conversation, which is going to be good. So, of course, my screen. So anyway, my screen sharing is disabled, which is fine because we as Black Pride RVA have had a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna kick it to Natasha, and we're gonna get started with the questions.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much again, Alexis, Alan, Charles, Chelsea, for being with us tonight. We really appreciate your presence here in talking about the Black political agenda. So with the climate that we're in now, we all know that this is front of mind for a lot of people. And we want to start the discussion, or at least have the discussion about what that means for Richmond. So to get started, I think it's good to start with some context around what a Black political agenda looks like. So I'm going to ask you guys first, what is a political agenda? If you guys could define that for us. I'll start with you, Chelsea.
Great. Thank you so much for having this and putting this together. Thank you for having me. I was really excited to be here. And to get to your question about what is a political agenda, for us, it is actually the laid out plan of what an org or a person, a representative is going to take to whatever body is discussing the legislation, whether that be city council, whether that be the General Assembly on the state level, but it is actually a written out syllabus almost to what the plan is of what they want to do and what changes they want to make. And that comes in the form of bills and legislation. So a political agenda is something that is very much targeted with a plan, with outcomes that you can talk about, but mostly it really contains the bills that we want to move forward with. I'd love to share and hear what my co-panelists also have to say, definitely, as two candidates here.
Absolutely. How about you, Alan Charles?
Sure. So me, I'm more of a student of history, and so one of the books that I think is really pertinent in this time is Black Power and the Politics of Liberation. And I think it's very important to talk about just what political power has done. Kwame Ture says that political power is a psychological control over the minds of men, and that this control can show up in our politics by an attempt of people from oppressive systems to have their definitions, their historical descriptions, and I guess their feasibility for what is possible placed on people. And so I think the first part of having a political agenda as well is making sure that our imaginations are not policed or limited, or to work under the guise as if we are building something that hasn't been built. But when you understand the power of Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, or even back to Reconstruction, that we are rebuilding what was broken down. So a political agenda has to be focused on what are the demands that we need, building the power with politicians, whether it's even electing the people that we know will stand by what we need, and then having the mobilization and the organization long-term to be able to bring people, demonstrate power, and then push for those results that we need.
Just to expand upon our imagination of how we advance a political agenda, policy is really important. Someone who often finds myself in the weeds of code and ordinances and legislation, but that's not the only way that we can advance a political agenda. And so, I know many of you might be aware of or involved in our local Human Rights Commission. They are also very important when it comes to governing our city and kind of the ideas that we want to move forward from a political basis. So we have to be careful to look at every possible avenue that we can advance our political agenda, whether that's a regulatory or administrative, executive kind of action, whether that's a legislative action. Judicial opinions are also important. So making sure that we're being very intentional and thoughtful about how we can advance our political agenda through various means. And that takes some very intentional and concerted efforts.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for those answers. I think that's a good jumping off point. So what about this moment do you think brought about the need for having a Black political agenda? And I'll start with you, Alexis.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, well, I will start with, we've long needed a Black political agenda. And I think, many folks have contributed in various ways to advancing a Black political agenda here in the city and across the state. 2 weeks ago, I woke up to calls from a friend that one of my friends had gone missing. And it was likely because she had been arrested after the protests. And that was really frightening. And as it turns out, she was one of the 233 folks who were arrested, zip tied, left on a bus overnight with no food, no water, just treated completely inhumane. And when I think about the city that I want to live in, the place that I want to call home, none of those things come to mind, right? And so when we talk about wanting to make sure that we're advancing a Black political agenda, we have to draw upon the years, right, of experience that our foremothers and forefathers and forepeople have carried with us. They've certainly struggled with some of the same inhumane treatment that we're still seeing in our streets today. But we know that right now the weight is even heavier than ever, and that we have to fight like hell to make sure that every person is treated with dignity and respect. And so, 2 weeks ago, I felt this stronger urge just because of the completely inhumane and undignified way that so many Richmonders were treated. But I would say it's definitely long past time that we have an intentional effort to create a Richmond that's for all of us and one that centers the experiences of Black folks.
Thank you. How about you, Alan Charles?
I think we're living in a time, and have long been living at a time, where we've just had kind of marginal reforms. And as Angela Davis would say, to be revolutionary is to get to the root of something. And so we have long lived under the pressure of slight reforms here and there versus really seeing who this institution, this carceral institution, is really designed to protect and serve versus target. And once you understand the source of an institution, you understand the outputs that you begin to see. And so just like Alexis was referring to, we see the same people that are really calling for a just system are having harsh reactions from that same system and being justified by things such as claims of inciting a riot and different things such as that. And it reminds me, as we're approaching Juneteenth as well, and if we think here historically in the city, the different narratives between Lumpkin Slave Jail and Devil's Half Acre, where we understand that people who were questing liberation understood what was going on there was Devil's Half Acre, the devil's work, but the system justified the devil's work through the language of the carceral system and defying crime, where their only crime really was requesting for the abolition of a system that was not going to give them liberation under quite reform. And so right now with Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade and George Floyd and Marcus David Peters, we are seeing the culmination nationwide and even within our city of people that have suffered under a system where the political imagination has only allowed for conversations on reform. and still under reform. Even we've seen a police chief resign, but after the death of Marcus David Peters, we saw another police chief resign, and those slight reforms didn't even stop it. And even the interim chief, we now have found out, even though he was part of the community response team, he was part of, he did a shooting in 2002 where he shot someone in the back that didn't even match the description. And so I think we are seeing people are tired of their political imagination and their quest for liberation being met with just a priority that says it's not feasible and we can only do reform. And that's why building an agenda and a power base to where we can set the tone, or as Kwame Ture would say, to butt against systems based in Anglo-conformity, that we can, as Black people, from our own restorative justice framework, can build the power and the agenda and the strategy to implement without having to ask for permission.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how about you, Chelsea? That's a hard follow-up, though. I don't know.
I was to say, who was to follow that? No, I think that Alan Charles, as always, gives us a great historical consciousness when we are looking in the current. And something that he always says that I repeat is, just because it's current doesn't mean it's new. But to get to your question, what are the dynamics that make us think about the political moment of a Black agenda, is, to me, unfortunately, whenever we start asking about a Black political agenda, it's because our struggle has now made the main page, right? Our death, it's just our eviction rate, it's our struggle. And that's when people are like, well, we need a Black political agenda. And so right now, in this particular moment, we're seeing the long-standing history of slave patrols that have now turned into a policing system that feeds into our carceral system, that has taken many Black fathers, Black mothers, Black people into a system that they're no longer in our families and our villages and able to support ourselves. So when we talk about what are the moments that strike us to start thinking about this, I think it's really important to know that it's always because our struggle has been highlighted in some type of mainstream media platform. That's the time when we start thinking about a Black political agenda, unfortunately.
All right, thank you all. Thank you for that. So you guys ready to get into it? So what are your top 3 points on the Black agenda? And you were last talking, so I'll start with you, Chelsea.
Well, this might come as a surprise to people. But my number 1 political agenda talking point right now as my advocate is marijuana justice. And in this moment, everyone is talking policing, but I want you to know that marijuana justice advocates have been talking about policing since we formed. It was one of the main reasons why we came to this. We say all the time that marijuana is the gateway to policing and to the carceral system. The smell of marijuana has been the key to approaching Black people, brown people, and people across, especially right here in Richmond. If you are Black, in Richmond, 1 out of 6 Black people are guaranteed to have an interaction with the Richmond Police Department every year. If you're Black, 1 out of 6. And that right there, most of the time, is because people say they smell marijuana. Now, I will also say my second one right now is to defund the police, which is heavily also into supporting the marijuana justice form. I put marijuana justice number 1, obviously, because that is my political piece, but also because it has the roundabout to divest from police, but invest it back into Black communities. And that's what what's happening in cannabis in our Commonwealth right now is happening. So we are hopefully taking the chains and handcuffs off of us from marijuana, and now really looking to pouring the revenue back into us. So number 2 would be defunding the police hardcore and divesting from the police, investing into schools and counselors. Why not a 1-for-1 replacement of cop to counselor, right? And my number 3 right now is to really just look at, and as we are defunding the police, I think it's important that we also gain to community control. So now looking at a different model of harm to care. So what does that look like? Does that look like a civilian review board? Does this look like more care options for first responders? Does this look like cops out of schools? Again, I'm really pushing that cops out of schools is the low-hanging fruit for localities, and it's important that we push that. So my top 3 is marijuana justice, defunding police, and community control from harm to care.
Thank you. Thank you. Alan Charles?
Sure. So I'm a firm believer that the revolution will not be improvised, and that we need to get to a place where we are not surprised by racism, but we are prepared for it. And as some people say, defense is the best offense. I think there's a very great program that's been happening in Baltimore, Maryland, called the Equity Assessment Index, where it pretty much brings forward into the process. Because currently what we do is that we make decisions out of, people love to say, a racial equity lens, but when is the lens applied? Typically after things have happened, and then we have reports around the history of redlining and heat islands and abatements coming out of certain communities and only going to different ones. Who gets, people who are sitting in jail for marijuana, but then you have these medicinal plants after the statewide, a certain amount of licenses, and it's not actually connecting. So what the Equity Assessment Index does is it brings a rubric forward into decision making, into city council, and hopefully city hall as well, where a decision making process would have to, where you pretty much would forecast, if we were to do this, what would be the disparate impact, and really taking the conversation from race outside of just the intent, but also the impact. And then as you go through a process, you'll be able to see which communities this would affect, and then you have to kind of go back to the drawing board in order to, at the front end, prevent disparate impact from happening in decision-making processes. I think also, and I agree with, we have to fund equity. And so one of the things that I really believe in is an equal pay for equal outcomes ordinance that really would, or resolution, depending on how it would affect finances due to the city charter, where essentially right now our public dollars go more to supplementing prosecutors than it does defenders. And the mayor cut that out of his budget for $137,000 or $140,000. But what's really crazy is that when you look at things such as civil asset forfeiture, where police officers are able to, whether somebody gets pulled over, they say, I smell drugs, and they can actually take cash and other things from the community, actually take money from the community to help fund that. And not only that, it can also be paired with the federal sharing program as well, is be able to look at that citywide and be able to redirect those funds that are taken from communities with information from people such as Richmond Transparency and Accountability Project. And as we defund police, also strategically reinvest in those over-policed Black and Brown communities so that equity actually can be funded. And of course, an independent civilian review board where you wouldn't have to have an appointment from the police chief or some type of citizen police academy. And of course, with that also comes with leadership, that we also cannot present people to head those processes who have been dodging accountability for shootings they themselves have been involved in since 2002. And so I think we have to be strategic. We have to make sure that equity is in our line items and not just in our speeches.
Awesome, awesome. Alexis?
Yeah, just to name what I think everyone on this call knows, which is that every issue is a Black issue. And so throughout every single, political issue that can be named, anytime a politician comes to you and says, like, here's my top 3, every single thing is a Black issue. Now, it doesn't impact every person equally, and that's where we start to engage in a deeper conversation. So when I think about my top 3, I can certainly underscore some of the issues that Chelsea and Alan Charles named. But what I would just lift up and add to this conversation is public health. We are in the middle of a public health crisis that is underscored and exacerbated because of the racist history of our medical system and because of the historic inequities in access to healthcare. And that includes the full range of healthcare, right? Certainly the way that folks interact with their doctor for blood pressure checks, but also the way folks respond in the maternity system and every other facet of our healthcare. And so when we see our city facing coronavirus, and for a while, every single person who died from coronavirus was a Black person, that is not, a surprise. That is not by accident or just happenstance. That is because of a racist medical system that has for a long time oppressed Black and brown people, and certainly continues to impact all of our health. And it's not just the medical system. We also have to think about the communities that we live in. Who has access to fresh air and exercise in our park system? Who has access to a safe community where they feel comfortable going out for a walk? I remember when I was working at Planned Parenthood, there was a doctor who came to address racism in the medical system, and spoke about how he first was enlightened to some of these issues because he recommended to a patient that they go out for a walk every night in their community. And when that person said, I don't feel safe doing that because of where I live and the crime in my community, that's when he realized access to healthcare and public safety and public health is all interconnected. And again, this is probably nothing enlightening to anybody here, but it is very important that as we're addressing any issue, that we're looking at it from an equity lens, and that we're talking about all of the surrounding circumstances and the factors that impact our access to, name your thing, economic opportunity, transit, healthcare, et cetera. So public health and kind of all those intersections would be number one. Number two, we have a lot of work to go still on access to education at every level, from early ed, preschool access, all the way up to higher education, vocational training, and skill building for folks who are post high school. That is also something that, has intersections when it comes to equity, when it comes to criminal justice reform, when it comes to the counseling and mental health services that folks interact with in our school system. So education has to be a part of our agenda. And then finally, I would just say workers' rights. You all, some may know that I currently work for the National Domestic Workers Alliance and Care in Action, where we work every day to uplift the workers who take care of our families and our homes, domestic workers, nannies, cleaners, home care workers. These folks have historically been left out of literally every protection that's on the books for workers. And it was just this year that we were able to guarantee minimum wage protections, which literally is the bare minimum for folks to be able to earn $7.25, right? Think about that. A lot of us have been talking about raising the minimum wage. Think about the folks who are caring for our homes and for our families who weren't even guaranteed that. And those are Black folks, y'all. Historically, these jobs have been Black women, Black immigrant women, folks, like literally. And so, when we talk about a Black political agenda, we have to look at the historic roots of economic injustice and unroot that and make sure that we're building not just, like I think someone mentioned some reforms. We have to literally start from scratch and make structural systems that are centering our communities, because they were built not just to exclude us, but to not ever include us. And so we've got to start from scratch. And I know many of you have been working on that in various ways, and I'm honored to be in a struggle with each of you.
So I'm gonna jump in. Thank you, Natasha, for getting us started. To our panelists who have hit it off, I want to jump in and filter some of these questions that have come in. I'm gonna do some of the easier ones. Alan Charles, if you could just put in the chat the name of the book that you recommended about the history of Black power and political change. And could you also name the assessment that you mentioned that's being used in Baltimore? And so thank you to Evan Peters for asking those two questions. That's going to be simply answered. And so for folks who are watching us, we'll make sure that we collect that and share that with our rebroadcast. Thank you, Alan Charles. Now here is, and I'm sorry, Ben, if I mess up your last name, but Ben Himmelfarb. He says, I'm really interested to hear the panelists' reflections and insights on the dynamics around a political establishment that Black people have a big role in the status quo in Richmond, especially the mayors and many other political allies and leaders, support for the RPD and regressive, conservative criminal justice / public safety solutions. So I'm just gonna invite one or two, well, Alexis Rogers one, and then we'll go with Alan Charles, since declaration, UGRC, Black Pride RVA does not endorse any political candidate. We open this conversation to everyone. We are a 501c3, and so we are not endorsing anybody who is running for political office in any way, shape, or form. And we are going to invite the people who have already made their declarations to answer to the question about Richmond's political status quo that is Black, or has a lot of Black people in it in the moment.
I'm grateful for the disclaimer. As someone who's often finding myself providing asterisks and disclaimers. What I would say to that, Ben, is number one, I think that, a lot of folks can be responsible for advancing a conservative agenda. And so I would be very aware, certainly, that there are Black folks right now advancing a conservative agenda, but that they are not alone in that, and that they are not, the only folks who could be in power advancing that kind of agenda. So moving on from that, we have options. And, I know we have options on this call, and then we have options in the community who have been out there fighting for progressive causes for a long time. And, it is never going to be my cause to put down another Black person. That is not where I see myself in this space. But what I will do is lift up my vision for the city. And that city includes all of us. And I was speaking to Chelsea earlier today about just reflecting on this moment for the undocumented and the immigrant community. Up in Prince William County yesterday, they formally disbanded and eliminated their agreement with ICE. They were one of the first counties to make that agreement and to literally participate in separating families. Today, we saw a historic decision from the Supreme Court that said that the Trump administration eliminated and tried to end the DACA program under improper terms. And for those who may not be aware, that program allowed folks who are here, who were born here or brought here, to attend our schools and to go through our communities just like any other American, and to stay here safely without fear of deportation. And the Trump administration has been trying to get rid of that. So Supreme Court weighed in and said, no, they did it wrong. Now we know that there are still going to be attempts to end the program. But I say all this to say, when I think about the Black agenda, when I think about advancing a progressive agenda, we have to do it for all of us. And I know that folks on this call are looking to do it for all of us, regardless of your immigration status, regardless of your gender identity, regardless of who you love, or where you work, or whatever you do. If you are a Black person, you're looking to bring together the whole community with you. You're a progressive Black person, you're looking to bring everybody along with you. And we've been in the struggle for Black liberation for so long that we can't afford not to bring everyone with us. When we center our identity and our struggle and the circumstances that we've found ourselves in literally for more than 400 years, we know that if we center those struggles, that we can bring everyone with us, regardless of immigration status, regardless of the circumstances that you find yourselves in personally. And so that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this group of folks and so many others who are really fighting for that progressive change.
Alan Charles, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it is important to note that there is no white power structure or institution that was solely built by white hands, right? And when I speak of whiteness, I speak of that philosophy of a racial caste system. And I think it's important, and for the book that I've mentioned, everyone, was Black Power and the Politics of Liberation. And they talk about what's necessary is something called political modernization, which, and one of the key points of that is one of them is searching for new and different forms of political structure to solve political and economic problems. And a key part of that is broadening the base of political participation to include more people in the decision-making process. And so it's the understanding that those that are directly impacted have one of the more key insights in what does it mean to craft a policy of liberation out of those various systems. So for example, that's why I'm running using things such as everyday solidarity task forces, where people who know the issues that are within the society, we have to kind of do away with this magical politician, one person, one story narrative who feels they understand and have the capacity to solve all issues. It's more so returning to the phrase of more so not the political celebrity, but the public servant that has the skill set to be able to put forward solutions that can bring people to a table to communicate what their issues are, and then making sure that we are not just simply there for our self-interest or from the quote unquote establishment that may or may not have put us there. And so understanding that also just Black visibility doesn't automatically equate to the forwarding of a agenda that would lift up Black communities and all communities as well. But we have to understand that when we do not question a system that has over generations produced the same outcomes, we cannot believe that just our mere presence within a system equates to the questioning and the challenging and the re-envisioning and imagination that needs to happen in these processes.
Thank you. And we invite participants to check out, because Chelsea is not verbally responding, but she is responding and she is helping us out. So make sure you check out the chat, because she has a link to her, I don't know if it's award-winning, but I'm going to go ahead and call it award-winning Race Capital radio show, where she brings on real people to talk about the issues, and then also put a link in there to another book. I want to take a question from Benita Kirk. And Chelsea, I would love for you to answer this, and then either Alexis or Alan Charles, if you feel strongly about responding to this. Her question is, who are the leaders in Richmond that are responsible for conveying the Black agenda to the powers that be?
Great. I saw this question, Benita. Thank you so much for it. I'm going to say that every single person on this call that you know is a leader, and if they are Black and fighting for Black causes, then it is all of our responsibilities. I really want to make that really, really clear, that it is not up to one platform. It is not up to one group. It is not up to one Black politician to carry all of the Black agenda items. I really love what the candidate Roger said about every issue is a Black issue. And I'm going to be really honest, from an organizer that has organized at a city level and at a state, that it is a lot of effort and labor to push agendas. That's why we have organizations. So I do want to say it's important to join an org and to have that support system to where that you can organize that labor productively, as well as split it up in coalition with other orgs, so that you can work in one space and other people work on other spaces. And I have not listed any orgs specifically by name on purpose, but now I will. I want to lift up marijuanajustice.org. We are Black run, brown run. We're in this very intentionally, and I answered Adam's question in the chat about reparations to Indigenous and Black folks. I want to lift that this past session, we passed a study bill with Jennifer McClellan that also just announced her run for governor today, which is amazing.
Oh, sorry. I'm not endorsing, I'm just affirming the presence. Black Pride RVA is not endorsing.
So now we have 2 Black women that are running for governor, which is just amazing. But Jennifer McClellan, Senator, supported marijuana justice to get a bill passed so that we can do a study. And that study is very specifically to look at how we can look at the reinvestment of the revenue that's coming into cannabis. And without marijuana justice, that racial equity of who and where were affected by marijuana prohibition would not have been studied. All right, they would have gone right over us with another bill that didn't include us. And that's why it's important for us to get our stuff together and be in those buildings. So I'm really excited to look at marijuana justice. I just want to say Black Pride RVA. I want to say New Virginia Majority has been holding it down for us in the General Assembly for a very long time. Richmond for All right here in the city of Richmond. We have a newly formed Black Freedom Caucus that's accepting members later on this month and in July, if you are part of Richmond for All. And there, I'm probably missing other folks right now. Oh, Risk with housing. Woo! They just made a big announcement and got the mayor to commit to millions of dollars of care money for housing, and a lot of that need that the candidate Chipman was talking about. So marijuana justice, Black Pride RVA, which is not a political org, but even they talk Black things, right? And that's where you can get your Black agenda issues from, right? If we hear each other, if you are working in the political space, then you go take those ideas to whatever leaders authority. That's all everyone's a leader. Some people just have an authority that we have granted them, but we can always take it back. And so those are the boards. And I would love, if you are looking for an issue specifically and have questions, please hit me up. I'm on all the social medias, and I would love to connect you with those groups.
Is there anything, Alexis or Alan Charles, you wanted to respond or add to what Chelsea said? No, y'all good? Okay, so Ben is back with another question. How do we communicate with a multiracial ethnic majority about the value of a Black political agenda? How do we communicate with a multiracial, multi-ethnic majority about the value of a Black political agenda?
I'd love to take a swing at that if that's okay. And you know, I'm a young preacher. I started preaching when I was 6, so I always preach from the text, as they say. So again, Black power and the politics of liberation. I think one of the most important things that we can learn around coalition building is an entire chapter in here about the myths of coalition. And I can go through some of the myths of coalition. And so within a multiracial organization, it says, assuming all political activity aimed towards Black communities have at its central goal the necessarily total revamping of the society, you have to make sure that that is a central goal and not a peripheral goal. We see, especially within the movement towards socialism and things such as that, you saw a historically Black leaders such as W.E.B. Du Bois or George Washington Woodbay, who very much was saying the question of this multiracial movement is how you respond to Black goals and whether they are centered or placed in the peripheral, as much of American society has. And so I think we have to understand which route are we pulling up and challenging. And so I think being able to understand, as Alexis was saying, a lot of the issues that we see today are rooted in a time where anti-Blackness was put into legislation, and we're still living in the vestiges and the results of that. Even when you look at not just the monuments on Monument Avenue, but the mentality behind them, the restrictive covenants, the NIMBYism, all of these other things that we see. And so we have to make sure that we understand how much the conditioning of whiteness that W.E.B. Du Bois says in the Souls of White Folk is a religion people are frequently being converted to, that we understand how much that really permeates us, even those who would consider themselves progressive, liberal, or the ally. Because when you study history, such as in a book called Eyes Off of the Prize, where when Walter White and Thurgood Marshall and other people at the were going to the United Nations to move the conversation from civil rights to human rights, it was Eleanor Roosevelt, who called herself the friend of the Negro, that killed that because of the email she was getting from the Jim Crow South. And so we have to even understand that those who call ourselves progressive, that we also have to progress past the institutions and norms based in anti-Blackness. And we can talk about the nonprofit industrial complex as well, but we have to understand that even those who seek to do it, understanding the depth of conditioning, that even those within a multiracial organization can still, within the stratification of value within those systems, still put Black issues at the bottom. And so we have to make sure that we get that priority straight from the forefront.
Alexis or Chelsea, we have people are responding, so there are at least two other questions that are on deck, and then Natasha has some other questions. We know that one of our panelists has a full schedule and may have to scoot out at 8 o'clock, and so we want to ensure that we have candidate Rogers for as many of the questions that the people who are watching have. So just offering any response to that question for folks. Y'all good? Okay. So I knew that this question was going to come up, and we are grateful for Evan Peters to ask it because it wouldn't be a Black event if this question wasn't asked. And that is, what are some of the best ways white folks in Richmond can help? I'm just saying, we know as Black Pride RVA, UGRC, that anytime Black people center an event, plan an event, white folks want to ask how they can help, how they can show up. And I think in this conversation, thank you, Evan Peters, for being the one that asked it, because I believe your other white colleagues wanted to also ask the question that we are most commonly used to responding to. So open that up to our panelists.
Okay, so I just want to say that I appreciate the question as well. And the reason why I fell out here, if anybody was watching, was just because Lacette brings to the forefront the fact that this comes up all of the time. And I think something I didn't want to say before to the prior question of how to address something in a multiracial group, but it's the same way of how do we just continue to center Black issues and Blackness, Black experience. And so white folks, I think it's you got to talk to your other white folks, and you got to be able to organize what you're able to do. I think it's really important that you don't look for folks to tell you everything. I think this question is important to ask, but understand what you can give, what resources you have, and what your real availability is, and to not offer things in an impulse moment. Right now, I know Black folks are getting reached out to by the minute from white folks, like, what can I do? Like literally by the minute. And we are trying to be really clear. Like, we have PayPal things and funds in our links. We try and get you to come here. Like, you being here right now is something you can do. And then taking this information and going back to your other white folks and saying, and you doing that organizing in your own spaces. There are many things that people can do. But I would also really love, I don't know if we're there yet, but I think it would be great to find a place where we don't feel like we have to take a time to figure out what white folks does right now. Because what if we had to be like, okay, all white folks do this, Asians, you do this, for other folks, you do this, right? It's different of, at this point, how do we just support one another in the focus for all? And to me, that just figures out what can you give, and then go do that with Black folks at the lead.
Any?
Sure, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Again, especially in this moment, I think it's very important that you say our name before we're dead, right? Say our name while we're still alive. Say our name in the job interview, say our name when it's in the boardrooms about who's going to be invested, who's going to get this grant. Say our name at the Thanksgiving table when Uncle whoever is saying all these other types of crazy things. And again, in the same book that I mentioned, they also talk about Kwame Ture also worked under Fannie Lou Hamer with Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and they had Freedom Summer, and he said that he noticed, and he was grateful for the white people that came in solidarity and kind of in those moments kind of came to work, but also saying that there are freedom schools that need to happen within the suburbs, within corporate America, within all these other types of places, because racism manifests itself long before Black people are dead, right? And so we also need to make sure that you understand the front lines aren't just, it doesn't just look like Lacette's background, right? But it also looks like the everyday decisions and within these institutions to say whose lives are we going to value, whose priorities are we going to fund, when things are limited or in a budget standpoint like we are now with COVID-19 where something has to get cut, are we saying the names of Black communities and Black issues during that time and not just when we have become a hashtag?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we received a question that is directly for Alexsis. I'm gonna ask the question and read the question as is stated. Also invite you in your response, Alexsis, to just link it back to like what it means to have a political agenda. So Jamal O'Neill is asking, I want to know where you stand on single family zoning in Richmond, given how it has segregated several neighborhoods. Also want to know what we can do to change the scope of quality economic development in our city and how it's accessed when it comes to helping grow the Black working class.
I appreciate that question. I just want to start from the kind of lens that I see housing, which is one, I want to make sure that every person has access to a stable living environment. And also I'm going to treat every single person with dignity, regardless of where their home is. And I think what we've seen in this current administration is a value for certain kinds of homes. What we've seen from some of our candidates in this race is a value for certain kinds of homeowners. And for me as a renter, as someone who, does not own a home, I think that regardless of your living environment, whether you're staying in Camp Cathy or you're a renter, you're a student at BCU, or you're a homeowner of many years, your family has owned a home in Richmond for many years, that every single kind of home and every person in the city should be valued and treated with dignity and respect. So that's just for perspective. When it comes to specifically how we make sure that we have communities that are safe for everyone and in my opinion, that should be economically diverse. I think that that's something that has to first start with that perspective, that we actually want that. And I wouldn't say that everyone has already valued, I should say always valued, having economically diverse neighborhoods and neighborhoods that everyone is welcomed in. We're in the middle of a strategic planning process right now, where we've seen a priority on certain neighborhoods having zoning, in a certain way. And we're seeing certain neighborhoods that still can't get access to a grocery store for reasons that are beyond me. And I think that as we move forward, we have to make sure that, again, every single neighborhood, every community, every person in Richmond is valued equally, instead of giving a priority to the folks who have always had access to wealth and power, and excluding and diminishing the value and the voices of folks who have historically been marginalized. So, I'm willing to listen and learn from everyone. I want to grow when it comes to understanding, the various policies that impact everyone. But when it comes to housing, you got to start with making sure that everyone feels like they're treated with dignity and respect. And for too long, we've just not had that in the city.
Thank you, Alexsis. Natasha, I'm gonna kick it back to you to give our panelists some more questions. And Lindsay, I got your question on deck. We want to ask some other more political agenda related questions, because we wanted to make sure that folks are educated on what it means to have a political agenda and the components of said agenda. So Natasha.
Thank you. So we spoke about earlier about advancing political agendas, and you all have mentioned things like education, defunding the police, marijuana justice, public health, that equity assessment index, which could be a critical piece to kind of tie all of these things together, right? Having the I guess the knowledge of something like that can help you make the decisions on what to do with that money when the police are defunded, right? And how to allocate that for education and public health and things like that. How can we put forth an agenda and continue an agenda that connects those dots and doesn't just leave, make concessions to leave certain things off, and to make sure that at the end of the day we're all reaching who we want to reach and actually putting forth an agenda that we're seeking to get put forth. If that does that make sense?
Can I take a stab at this real fast?
Absolutely.
What I heard you say is, how do we put forth an agenda and not make so many compromises, right? And make sure that we tie it into also what's going on. Is that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So what I hear with that is we can push our political agenda in the many diverse ways that the panel has talked about earlier. And just somebody that has been doing this in many diverse ways of pushing political agendas, I will say that it is so much easier, y'all, if we have elected officials and people that are appointed in those positions that also mirror our values. It is a completely different world of having these things weaved in and having them all work together versus having to beat on the door of one person only to find out that they stuck one line in there of legislation that now screws up your entire bill, but you didn't necessarily even realize it because you didn't have the resources. But these are some of the things that the tricky things that happen with folks. But to answer your question of how do we really do that in like a broad spectrum, because there are many ways of how to do it. I think you join an org. I think you and then join an org, but then also help candidates win.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to understand I'm sorry.
Oh no, by all means.
Oh, okay. I think it's important to understand the rules of engagement in the political context in which we live, especially understanding things such as the Dillon Rule state, and which limits local, pretty much local bodies have to ask for permission for things that aren't specifically granted. And having the relationships and the moral and political will to build those relationships, and not just to say, well, we can't do it. I know for the Independent Civilian Review Board, a lot of the talk is, well, I don't know if we have subpoena power. That has to be state where Dillon rule. Well, but yet for other things that corporate interests may want, the mayor would pick up the phone and call the Richmond delegation twice for different certain things. So understanding that we have to build a relationship so that if it is something that is in Dillon rule state, that we have people within the General Assembly, again, that have our priorities in mind, that we can partner with to push those agendas. Also understanding what the federal government plays a role in and who has oversight over fundings and things such as that. So when you're dealing with housing, sometimes that's going to be a HUD issue. And so understanding who is your representative in Virginia that has that oversight and getting them to intervene. That's something that we had to do with the illegal evictions, and it was a violation of United States Code 1437B Section D, and so we were able to go to Senator Tim Kaine and be able to kind of at least get have that influence over that process and get a freeze on evictions. Then working with Senator Jennifer McClellan on Senate Bill 708 to expand tenants' rights at the statewide level. But still, we need on City Council people that are going to not reward bad behavior and have someone who's violating rules get to choose who their next Board of Supervisors is going to be. So understanding the landscape, and again, this is the work of civic education that we have to do, such as the work of Fannie Lou Hamer, Dorothy Cotton, Amelia Boynton Robinson, that we have to understand the playing field and where we need to have allies, where we need to elect people, where we need to make sure that if there is one place system set to frustrate our political imagination, that we know how to circumvent around that and get it done at every level.
Are there any recommendations on how people can educate themselves more on civics, on the process of politics?
I was going to say, I can jump in here a little bit. Progress Virginia and New Virginia Majority both come to mind as Virginia-based, not necessarily Richmond-based, but Virginia-based organizations that really do a good job of breaking down the state legislative process. Now, every level of government is its own animal, and certainly within every level of government, there, like we talked about before, various kind of channels and branches of government. But I would say those are a couple of key organizations, but also think about the folks who interact with government in a way that you wouldn't traditionally call, the authority. So think about the folks who are working in City Hall in janitorial roles. Think about the folks who are on Capitol Square as Capitol police officers. Think about the various kinds of folks who interact with, the government that you're trying to understand better, and learn about what their interaction with it is, because you'll certainly hear, the kind of Schoolhouse Rocks version from folks who are kind of teaching you civics, but you'll learn a lot more, I would say, from talking to the folks who literally day to day are kind of the grind of city government and state and federal government as well.
Did anybody else want to chip in on that?
I was just going to say, I put a link in for Richmond for All. We do a lot of political education. We hold films and documentaries. This is pre-COVID, but we also do webinars and things like that. Political education is a huge part for us, and always looking for what people want to know. I hate to keep plugging myself, but Race Capital, every week we are giving you political education of what's happening. And on our media source, we are able to tell you who or what and what's happening. So we keep ourselves educated to give that information to you. So Race Capital is also a place where if you want to know more, just ask.
Awesome. Thank you. So I just want to, for everybody watching and here tonight, I just kind of want to break down what we've heard so far. It seems as if the way to go to progress a political agenda is to join an organization, right? Like that should be step one, to find like-minded people who can help you push that agenda forward. After that, once you have joined that organization, it's about holding your political leaders accountable, getting out there and voting for people who you believe will help push forward that political agenda. So with that said, I do want to go to the questions, because Lindsay asked if you all could talk about voting and how Virginia specifically makes it difficult for certain folks to vote.
I really wanted to take this question, which is why I know I have to jump for another meeting a little bit, but this is something that's really important to me, that I was really glad to see get asked. Number one, we're literally, the port city for slavery for this whole country, right? And so when we talk about oppression over years, it's literally in our democracy in the city, in the foundation of this Commonwealth. So, the right to vote is certainly a struggle that we've been fighting for many years, and literally within my parents' generation, probably some folks on this call's generation, have achieved that right. And so we talk about the ways that Virginia has made it difficult over the years. We've seen it all, whether it's the poll tax or, various language access barriers to the ballot. I would say that we're in a new day in Virginia. We've not destroyed every systemic issue when it comes to access to the ballot, but I do want to make sure that people know of a couple recent changes that will be in effect for November. So number one, we'll have early vote for the first time ever in Virginia. So many of folks who have lived in other places and across the country know that, you might be able to vote early. And in Virginia, we'll finally have that. So 45 days leading up to November, you'll be able to vote early, either by mail or in person at the local registrar's office. We'll also soon have greater access to language justice for voting, which is so important. Before, localities could kind of decide if they wanted to provide access to a ballot that's in their voters' language. Like, can you imagine? I know many of us, obviously, on this call probably speak predominantly English. Can you imagine reading some of those referendums in a language that you don't, I can barely read them in English sometimes, right? And so it's really important that we've recently made that change so that folks will be able to get access to the ballot in their preferred language. Something that we still need to work on is postage for absentee ballots. So many of us right now are voting by mail because it's easier, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, but you're putting that stamp on the envelope, and not every person is going to have access to the stamp. Not every person is going to think about that when they go to mail. And frankly, you shouldn't have to pay 50 cents to put your vote in the mail. The government should pay that for you, and other states have done it. The federal government could pay for it. We have to keep pushing to make sure that that is so here in Virginia. And then finally, and this is a big one, this could be its own call, redistricting. We are, no, Chelsea's like gonna fall out. We have to get this right. We're right now in the middle of a census. So number one, take the census, tag 5 people and tell them to take the census. The census makes sure that we get the funding that we deserve for our communities. It also makes sure that we get the representation that we deserve because of the way that lines will be drawn based on our population. But it's further than that. Virginia has the power also to draw our state legislative lines, and it's important that we do it in a way that reflects the power and the strength of Black voters. And we know that historically, our government has tried to condense Black voting strength, and we can't allow that anymore. We have to make sure that every single Black voter and every person who lives in the city and this Commonwealth has equal authority at the voting box and equal power to elect our elected officials. We had a huge fight, even among Democrats, this past legislative session, to make sure that we had racial equity in redistricting. And this is something literally we could have hours-long seminar on. So I would just invite you all, if you're interested in understanding more about the fight for fair districts, to get plugged into New Virginia Majority's work. They are really leading it from a racial equity lens and not from, kind of the mantra of just pick your legislators. It's so much deeper than that. It's not just about making sure that people can pick their legislators. It's about making sure that our neighborhoods are drawn in a contiguous and fair way, that Black communities are not concentrated and kind of gerrymandered into the same districts. So I was so excited to see that question about voting. I'm sorry I packed so much into that response, but I hope that everyone here will, certainly take note of the progress that we've made, but understand there's so much more to do to make sure that every person, especially Black and brown folks, have equal access to the ballot.
Excuse me. No, that's awesome. That's awesome, Alexis. Thank you for that in-depth response. That's exactly what we needed. So we do have another. See you, Alexis.
See you, Alexis. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And then there were 4. So we do have another question from Benita. She asked, have we been able to identify our SWOT concerning voter participation and our ability to hold officials accountable when it comes to Black issues here in Richmond?
Yeah, I think, just as hard as it is to, we have challenges in voting and due to structure, but also how do you engage, and especially when we talk about at the state level as well. I just was speaking with the head of the Richmond Baptist General Convention, who was talking about the work they've tried to do within subcommittees once people are elected to really make sure that special interests don't pass their agenda to the side. That, it's really hard with availability of the time. So even for me, when I was helping to pass Senate Bill 708 with Senator Jennifer McClellan to help expand tenants' rights, we had people who are ready and willing to come and testify to share, from their experience, what it actually meant. But because the timing of it was, be here between 2 and 5 tomorrow, right? And then you take off and then it gets moved to a different day. I think even structurally, we have to begin to really see what era some of those timings were set up and for who within the power structure and the availability, especially when you're talking about working class people as well, how much that is available. And even the system that we have as well, I'm also very concerned around after COVID, especially with things such as Richmond 300 and city planning and zoning and all these other types of things that are available during certain times and in very short windows of response, very heavy versus having a very open, almost message board type of way of engagement. There's a really interesting book by Gavin Newsom called Citizenville that talks about leveraging technology to open up means of communication digitally. And I think the more accessible leaders are after they are elected, the higher that you're able to have with accountability. But again, this is also talking about voting your priority and your platform, and not just being emboldened and linked to just one official, and saying that if you do not have these objectives, then there are going to be consequences in the next voting cycle, and making sure that you are applying pressure and sustained pressure with a plan for what you want. because it's not just about getting someone in, it's also about making sure they do not become tainted within that institution. And as I like to say, sometimes there's that election day solidarity where they will say what they need to get in, but then how do you hold them accountable once they are there, and how accessible are they willing to be and commit to being to the communities that got them?
And I'm just going to quickly jump in because the question was really, that's why I chuckled. I was like, oh, a SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
This is great. But that's the kind of thing that if you're joining an org, your org will decide what your priorities are, because everything is a Black issue and there's not one org that can take on everything. So you decide what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are to you putting forward the political agenda that your organization, the people, and the collective thought have come together to do. So yes, in orgs, you should have some type of strategic plan or SWOT or something that captures your priorities for your Black political agenda. And if anybody wants help on facilitating that strategic plan on what your priorities are, you can follow me and hire me for that facilitator and support a Black woman and Black business and get your org going in your ideas.
There you go. I don't know if you guys knew that, but Chelsea is she's the go-to. Absolutely. So
I got a lot of jobs, y'all. That's what it is.
Awesome. Let me see. I think we had
Yeah, it looks like we got another question. We have another question here, but we also have Natasha. Someone asked on Facebook what the deadline for Virginia is for the census. I thought it was August 14th, but I could be wrong. Do we know the date?
They've extended it because of Corona. So
October 31st.
So it's October 31st?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
All right. Well, this question is for Chelsea. If we have time, and if you are willing, I have not seen a big showing of support for Black Lives Matter or the Black agenda from a number of local nonprofits that I know house a lot of social workers. I have to wonder if social work, as both an institution and a profession, isn't failing our ethical values around social justice. Would you be willing to share your thoughts on social work's response to this movement, and if you see areas of improvement?
Mm-hmm. Who asked this question? I can't see it.
This was Jeremy.
Okay. Hi, Jeremy. Great question. So, dope Black social worker. Oh, someone's doing fireworks. Sorry. So, dope Black social worker. I was like, dang. I live in South. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, no, Manchester. It's all good because I heard the same thing and I was like, what? Just, yeah, okay.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Sorry, I thought I was on mute.
Social work. Dope Black social worker, and y'all, if you're following the chat, I'm trying to put as much as I can in the chat. Dope Black social worker, her name is Kim Young, and she has a social media platform on Instagram mostly, but I've also seen her on social media on Facebook today. She is right now pushing the National Association for Social Workers, that's a national ethics board that kind of oversees social workers, to come on aboard to Black issues. So she is doing that work and that labor. When I saw that, I said, yes, sis, because we know that social work, again, historically, everything is racist, including social work, and a lot of the inequities with families and separating families, adoptions and things are rooted in social work, and why following the Association for Black Social Workers is so important, and why there is so much organization in Black social work, because Black social workers actually came in decades ago and helped the foster care system not be so racist and have these regulations. So your question is wonderful, that you're right, they not on board, and it's going to be up the work of Black social workers to push them there. But that is something too that this is not planned, but continue to lift the work of Jennifer McClellan, the senator, got passed a social work act this past session, and she's working to get it funded to continue to lift the work of social workers. So if you want to support what social workers need, which is money to do this work, you can support that at state level as well as nationally. You can help do what Kim Young is doing around here, and you can follow her at Dope Black Social Worker and push, because she has a petition to the National Association for Social Worker to get their stuff in order.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. We do have another one. How has social media impacted the Black agenda? This is from Larry Albright Williams.
Oh my gosh, it's brought everybody's attention to it. If it wasn't for a cell phone, we wouldn't be here, y'all, right? Like, a cell phone is our biggest protection. This is one thing I tell organizers all right now. Your cell phone is everything. Your social media is everything. Race Capital, I'm literally watching it because we're like 10 followers away from reaching 10K in the last 3 weeks, just because everybody needs this information. The mainstream media isn't doing it. This past week on Race Capital, we had not one, but 2 people that got hit by cars, one by the KKK and one by the police, a police car. And they came to us and they said they don't trust mainstream media. They want their stories told with us. And so that's all through our connections of social media, that we are brought to this work through the work of through the camera, the lens of social media, because social media is just independent media, right? It's our media. And so that's the point, that we can now create and shape voices and these issues in the political education and awareness through, like, that's C3 work. I'm gonna put it on Black Pride a little bit, that awareness of what our issues are, that could just be a social media awareness page, right? Like, that's not political, it's just what it is. So I would say, from somebody that has created a following, rooted and educate folks through social media right now, it's pretty huge.
Yeah, I would agree. As you understand the history of the Black media in social movements, there's a reason Maggie Walker had a newspaper. There's a reason John Mitchell Jr. had a newspaper. There's a reason Ida B. Wells had a newspaper. And there's also a reason why police shot a cell phone 2 nights ago with a rubber bullet, right? It is, again, about controlling the narrative and framing the spirit of liberation as criminal. Dr. King had a mugshot. Nelson Mandela had a mugshot. Rosa Parks had a mugshot. Marsha P. Johnson has a mugshot. Thurgood Marshall has a mugshot. And probably weren't labeled as peaceful protesters during their time. And so I think it is important that we control our narrative and continue that legacy of media. And now with social media, it's more accessible, as Chelsea was speaking. And that you have a direct line to what's really happening and to what the truth is. And then you can also see now the juxtaposition. Black people have known for quite some time that the media has a narrative around us, but now you can actually see that social media will have it first, and then you will see what the police department says later, even though you can have the videos of them running over citizens with cars and saying people are threatening the mayor when they're just going through a process of accountability. And so it's important for us to, and that's another way that our imaginations are policed and how we view the work of liberation. And that is also a tool in disrupting a Black political agenda as well.
Well, listen, for the folks watching, our participants, thank you so much to our panelists. I'm going to do a quick share screen so that we make sure folks can see how to follow y'all on, at minimum, Instagram. But we will make this video available to folks. And just to say thank you, like, this is what tonight was all about, making sure that we talked about a Black political agenda and the components of it and the nuances, and you all did an awesome job. This is who we are. Us Giving Richmond Connections we are the nonprofit that presents Black Pride RVA. Our vision is to actualize health equity within the Black LGBTQ community, and we do that through fostering healthy connections with Black LGBTQ communities through education, empowerment, and social engagement. Third Thursdays is our monthly opportunity to connect, and because of Ms. Rona, COVID-19, we are doing that virtually. And so we want to just ask that you put on your calendar and stay connected to us, and we'll give you, all of our social media handles are Black Pride RVA on Facebook, Instagram. These were our panelists tonight. So thank you to Chelsea Higgs Wise, to candidate Alexsis Rogers, to candidate Alan Charles Chipman. And those are their Instagrams for either their personal platforms or their campaign platforms. Again, we as UGRC Black Pride RVA are not endorsing any candidate. We are grateful that they would come and share information with us because they are trusted sources within our community, and they're committed to not only Black liberation but Black and LGBTQ liberation, because we live intersecting lives, or as Mama Lord, Audre Lorde would say, we do not live single issue lives, right? And so make sure that you follow them. We want to give a shout out to what we're doing. Virtual Black Pride RVA is happening July 16th to the 19th, the trilogy. We'll be putting out content, doing some live events. We'll have a dance party, and make sure to just follow us. And then folks have asked, and we will, forgot the last part, didn't edit that part. Y'all just gonna have to work with it. Only follow the first two. You gotta have grace for yourself and others in this process. Because otherwise you're just following into white supremacist capitalistic notions of productivity, and that's not what this moment is about. We want you to understand that your donations do matter, and our PayPal and our Cash App are UGRC RVA, and PayPal is at gmail.com, and that's our Cash App. Listen, at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that we're offering those connections, and we're just super, super grateful for all the folks that showed up tonight, all the folks that were willing to ask questions, and thank you to our panelists, again, Alan Charles Chipman, Chelsea Higgs Wise, and Alexsis Rogers. And you stay connected to us, Black Pride RVA, on all of the platforms, because we will be unfolding. And we will be stepping up to make sure that we are providing that connection to education, and particularly political education in this time that we are living in. So thank you again. We invite folks to share this Facebook Live video. Thank you, Natasha, for being the co-moderator tonight. It's always good when you have somebody chill, because her being chill makes me chill, and it balances us out. So we just say thank you to everybody, and I think, yeah, that'll be it for tonight.
Well, thank you, Black Pride. Yes.
Yay!
I just feel so honored to be here with you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Take care.
All right, take care.
That's right.